if you bring a toxic client or a bad relationship into an organization, it will pollute everything because you're not living to your values. If we stand up and we tell folks that we've got a no jerk rule, and then all of a sudden, you've got a roster full of them. And by the way, we're not chasing perfection. People are human. But if you're violating your values don't mean anything. And that's the key. We've got a little purpose book. In fact, I've got one in front of me here at LOOMIS, and it's got all of our values and our purpose and our mission laid out in it. And I hold that up at our quarterly blueprint meetings where we kind of review all our work. But I hold that up and I say, this is our.
Welcome to Rise Leaders Radio. I'm your host, Leanne Mallory. As a leadership coach, I work inside organizations and I focus on helping leaders achieve their whole person potential and meaningfully contribute to their organization's mission. With this podcast, I share leadership best practices, developmental approaches, and stories of exemplary leaders. Welcome. This is Leanne, and you're about to listen to part one of a two-part conversation with Mike Sullivan, CEO of the LOOMIS Agency. You'll hear more about Mike in the actual introduction. I just wanted to set some context here at the beginning. In this first conversation, we'll hear Mike tie culture and leadership to brand success. In the next episode, Mike outlines the 7 elements of culture and adds emphasis to those elements in the context of COVID-19 and its impact on workforce and culture. Mike is passionate and our conversation is energetic. I always love talking to Mike. Please enjoy. My guest today is Mike Sullivan, and there is so much that I have to say about Mike. He's the CEO of LOOMIS, which is a full-service challenger brand ad agency who are full in with the mantra, never underestimate the underdog, which we'll talk more about today. LOOMIS wins armloads of awards for their work, and they help their clients get great business results as well. Mike and his co-author, Michael Tuggle, published a book last year, The Voice of the Underdog, How Challenger Brands Create Distinction by Thinking Culture First. I'm listening to the book now, and it is filled with inspirational story after inspirational story about how challenger brands achieve success through culture, which was counterintuitive to me. And I'd also add courage. I really do love this book, Mike.
Thank you so much, Leanne.
Yeah. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, Mike can speak from experience about culture. So you speak from which you know. In addition to being recognized for their creative work, LOOMIS is a multi-year award winner of various types of great places and best places to work. So congratulations on that too, Mike. That's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a collective effort, of course. We've just got a great team and we've worked hard on it over the years.
I believe it. You can feel it. And just as some context, I've done a good bit of work with leaders inside LOOMIS. So I also know that you walk your talk. And so feel really good about our conversation today because I know that what you say isn't theoretical. These are things that you practice. So I want to start by asking you to define what a challenger brand is. Now, it makes sense once I knew, but I had not heard that term before I started working with you and your agency.
Yeah, well, so those of us who studied marketing and advertising at school or business for that matter would understand a challenger brand as just any brand that's not number one in the marketplace. So that's sort of a classic definition. But really, challenger brands are those that are certainly challenged from a resource standpoint, but they're also oriented towards disruption. They're oriented towards shaking up the marketplace, changing the rules in a way that favors them. And that's where it gets interesting and creative and fun.
Yeah, it is. And as I was listening to the book and thinking about it more, it feels like, because I work primarily in the mid-market myself, that that's many of the organizations that I work with are those challenger brands. And it really helped me as I'm considering these organizations, what they're trying to do, what they're up against, and, even how, as I consult with them and coach their leaders, help them be successful because of the mindset that you helped me recognize in the book. So it's just fantastic.
Well, I appreciate that. And yeah, challenger thinking is not limited to marketing and advertising. It really needs to permeate an entire organization. I mean, people within an organization need to think of and understand themselves as challengers. I think it was Michael Eisner, a great quote. When he was at Disney, he's like, as long as you think and behave as though you're coming from behind, you've got a shot at staying ahead. And that is, I think that really sums it up. It's not something that's just limited to folks who are traditionally constricted from a resource standpoint. It goes well beyond that.
So what you're doing in the book is you're tying culture and brand,
right?
Which, like I said earlier, was counterintuitive to me. I just didn't put those two together. This is going to be really unfair of me to ask, as you've written a whole book about that, the tie of culture and brand. Right. But why are those two linked? What's important there?
Yeah, I mean, culture and brand, brother and sister, hand in hand. So, an example, Chick-fil-A, and we write about this in the book, they routinely outperform all of their QSR peers by a wide margin. Their average unit volume is something like 4 million. They're only open 6 days a week. Well, how do they achieve that? Well, they're so well known for the way they deliver their service. And that is an endemic part of their culture. I was listening to an interview with Truett Cathy from years ago, who's now passed. And, the interviewer asked him, he says, gosh, Truett, how do you get people to say please and thank you at Chick-fil-A? How do you train them to do that? And it was real simple and folksy. He said, well, we don't train them to do that. We hire people who already say please and thank you. It's clearly not that simple. But the culture that is created inside a company like Chick-fil-A allows them to succeed in the marketplace in a way that's very different than their peers. Their employees will do things for that brand that employees at other brands simply won't do. And there's long lists of companies that have that sort of benefit by virtue of the fact that they've just got the right folks. And yeah, I believe it all starts there.
Yeah, it reminds me, I worked with a woman at EDS way back in the day, Marcia Clark, and she had this saying, hire the traits, train the skills.
Yep.
And yet, or also, you opened the book in your introduction about the mattress company.
Yeah.
That had a culture around sales process and training that kind of in this, I think you call them huckster or kind of dog eat dog world of mattress sales. It was their training also that helped them. So it's not just the traits, but also they had a culture around their sales process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so in that case, he did build just a wonderful culture. And again, starting with the people. So he was very deliberate about the kind of folks that he brought into his organization. He wanted to build a different kind of mattress shopping experience, was very deliberate about that. So wouldn't hire from competitors who had what we call sort of the up system in sales. When you walk into a store and you just feel like you're being hotboxed immediately. Well, that's hard to train out of somebody once it turns out. And so he would start with people who had no experience in the industry and then invest a great deal of money and time in training them. And as a result, in doing our own research, we would go into these stores and secret shop them. And by gosh, the experience was very, very different. And as a result, his return rates on mattresses were a lot lower than his category peers. We talked to him about, why don't you've already operationalized this excellence. Why don't you leverage it in the marketplace and disrupt with a 1-year money back guarantee? And boy, I remember the meeting. His eyes got wide. He's an analyst. He went away for a couple of weeks to think about that. I'm sure crunched all kinds of numbers, came back and said, yeah, let's do that. And we did. And I mean, the first month out of the gate, their sales were up 30%. The second month, similar, and they sustained that. The interesting thing about that is one of the competitors who's nationally known and was well known for sort of the opportunistic sales model tried to match that and had to reel it back in almost immediately because they were overwhelmed.
They had so many returns,
right,
huh?
Right. You've got to operationalize these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And the way to operationalize these things is by starting, with your culture and making sure that that's right.
Yeah. So, and it seems like when you talk about culture, you talk about things like purpose and values and leadership. And in fact, we're going to talk a little bit later about you and Michael Tuggle defined those 7 elements. So we'll talk about that later. So that's a great tie to the brand and the culture. You're also really clear about North Star leadership and the value or the place, the role that the leadership holds there. Yeah. And as the CEO of LOOMIS, and you all yourself are a challenger brand. You are. So as you're vetting potential clients or, getting to know your new clients, I'm curious about what you look for that what clues you're looking for that tell you about your client's culture and how you're going to work with what you're seeing there. So tell us about that a bit.
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Leanne. And so I'm a big believer that, especially in a professional services industry, whether you're an ad agency, an accounting firm, or whomever, your culture is going to reflect in large part the company that you keep, so your clients. If you've got difficult, challenging, unreasonable clients, that's going to infect your culture. It's what you tolerate. So we like to, instead of pursuing new business, we like exploring a fit with potential prospects. So when we get an inquiry or when we're reaching out to folks, even before we reach out to folks, we do our homework on the leadership. We go out, we look at ratings and reviews. We go out and look at, examples of that might illustrate what kind of culture they have. We look at the senior leadership surrounding that leader. When we have an in-person meeting, there's all sorts of verbal and nonverbal cues that give you a great indication as to whether or not this is something that might work.
That's what I'm interested in. Like when you're with them, what do you see or feel and what are you paying attention to?
Bottom line, what I always look for is the way they treat people and the way they treat their people, how they interact, how they engage. Do they listen? Do they have a point of view that is inflexible? Are they inviting other people inside their organization into the conversation in a way that is going to reflect well on a relationship we might have with them? Do their subordinates seem to be afraid to say something about any aspect of what they're doing? And all these things, we pick these things up.
We do.
And we've got like radar for this stuff. If you step away and you feel like this is a person or these are people that I would enjoy being with and working with, you're on the right track. If you step away and you've got questions about that, it seems to me every time it's not going to work out. It's not a relationship that's going to be productive. So it's almost those sort of soft human skills, the connection. What is the quality of that connection that we look for first? If you've got that.
I can imagine the conversations that you all have when you leave these meetings, and they could serve to be really reflective about, what you're noticing in other leadership teams, and then what, and how would we stack up? How would we rate ourselves? What does this say? We're noticing this about this, these things about this client. How do we perform on those same measures? And it seems like it would be a constant bar or standard that you're holding yourself to, and a reflective conversation that you just could keep alive all the time.
It's really true. So it's easy to talk about the relationships that kicked off, and we just won a new client. I'm so excited about First Light Home Care out of Ohio. And immediately we could just tell that they are so focused on culture, that their operators or franchisees, you can tell right down to that level that they're bought in on it. It's reflected in everything that they do. That was easy for us. I've also had experiences where we had an account out of Houston that was very attractive. They wanted to work with us, but it was real clear that the culture was toxic. And by toxic, I mean they had a command and control leader who surrounded himself with sycophants, really, and it just as attractive as the billing was, and it would have been easily our largest client at the time. This goes back a decade. We declined because we knew that was going to end badly. We'd wind up abusing our people. And I always think about that. Are these the kind of people that I want to put in relationship with our folks? Because I think the world of our folks. And, who do you want to bring into your family, so to speak?
Yeah.
And that may sound real soft and maybe cheesy to some folks, but it's interesting. The number one word that people use to describe really rich and rewarding and supportive cultures is family. I used to have a problem with that when I was younger, for whatever reason. I thought, oh, my family's at home. No, you spend so much time with these folks that they do become sort of an extension of your family. And I think it's a high compliment.
Yeah. And we have a choice about this family, our work family.
Right.
We don't choose our family of origin, but we can choose what family that we work with. And so that's really important. Before I go to this next question, which is about the culture at Loomis, I do want to say, at the very beginning, I was talking about challenge your brands, needing culture and courage. And what the example that you just gave, I think is such a great one for the courage to say no when something is not a fit, and you can just look into the future, past the bottom line, past the revenue, and look at, the ripple effect that it can have on your culture if you play with clients like that. No matter how lucrative, it's like you would probably end with a loss.
You can destroy a culture doing that very easily. Earlier in my career, when I was too young to be running anything, but I was at 28, 29, I was the president of another agency. I would chase anything that moved. I just thought that the idea was get more business, grow, be bigger. It's a fool's errand. Our turnover was right there at the industry average in terms of clients and employees. If you bring a toxic client or a bad relationship into an organization, it will pollute everything. Because you're not living to your values. If we stand up and we tell folks that, we've got a no jerk rule, and then all of a sudden, you've got a roster full of them. And by the way, we're not chasing perfection. People are human.
Yeah.
But if you're violating your values don't mean anything. And that's the key. We've got a little purpose book. In fact, I've got one in front of me here at Loomis, and it's got all of our values and our purpose and our mission laid out in it. And I hold that up at our quarterly meetings. And we have quarterly blueprint meetings where we kind of review all our work and talk to one another about what we're doing. But I hold that up and I say, this is our target. We don't always hit our target, but we know when we miss it. And that's where the accountability comes in. And I think we do a pretty good job here of, responding to that, trying to stay true to those principles. I think it's critical.
So you might be, starting to answer my next question, which, again, I've been in your office a lot. I've worked with several of your leaders. I've just learned that you have half the turnover of the industry average.
Yep. You
win awards for your culture. So tell us a little bit about your culture. You just described part of it there. You have it documented. Yeah. You refer back to it. It's not just something that you've written down and then put it on a shelf, or you have it laying around in your lobby for visitors to come look at, but you're using it. So just say a little bit more about what you're doing to keep the culture alive.
Well, I'd be happy to. So, our culture is informed by all of our experiences, and it's certainly informed by my early experiences in the industry and just in working life. And ultimately, I decided I just wanted to create the kind of place that people want to work on Monday morning. They want to come in. There's no Sunday night dread, that kind of thing. And again, it doesn't mean that it's perfect, but what it does mean is that we're focused on, the right things. And I read a book years ago by Don Clifton when he first published it. What was it called? First Break All the Rules.
Oh, yeah.
And, he had a list of like 11 or 12 things in there that people are looking for in their jobs. And what I did essentially was to try to get real deliberate on all those sorts of things. One of them was your relationship with your direct supervisor. Well, how do you improve that? Well, you hire the right people to lead others. And again, for us, it all starts with recruiting. And so I think at the end of the day, if you're very deliberate about that on the way in, what you wind up with is a culture that performs in a way that you hadn't even imagined. So we're probably going to shift here to like an unlimited PTO policy. And I have no qualms about that with my culture. 10 years ago, I might have, 12 years ago, 15 years, definitely would have. But it evolves and it shapes over time. But if you're deliberate and purposeful around it, you can create it. Don't know if I answered the question. I kind of got a little off track there, but.
Well, that's okay. When I think of you and your culture, one of the things that's a standout for me, because I've been, involved in this part of your culture and, the benefactor of being able to work with some of your leaders is that you have a real culture of learning and you invest in development. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've been in conversation with one of the leaders there that I'm coaching, and I'll ask a question, have you heard about X? And I'll name a tool or a concept. And they'll say either, we just talked about that in our, learning groups. I guess you all have regular. And it happens often enough that you go over the same content, whether it's like the empowerment dynamic or the ladder of inference or whatever it is. It is ongoing. So you don't just say, we've done that once, we're done. But then you're also investing quite heavily in your leaders' development.
Well, we definitely are. And so that's a great point too, Leanne. And I do think a lot of this shifted for me a little more than a decade ago. Our good friend Rand Stegan, I went through his leadership academy. The intention there was, hey, I'm a pretty good advertising guy. I know enough about marketing to make a good living. But what I have never been taught, at least explicitly, is how to lead people. I think I've got good intuition. People seem to like me. It goes way beyond that. And that really opened my eyes, and it really shifted my focus to become a far more deliberate leader. And so obviously I got my partner, Julie. She went through the academy, and Tina Tackett, my executive creative director, and others. And what happened as a result of that was all of those sorts of things started to show up. We were intentional about some of it. Some of it just happened organically. But in the end, we've created an environment that is, yes, it's a learning environment, and it's a caring environment too. And it's a performance environment. And it can be all those things. It requires, like I said, constant attention and balance and really recruiting the right people in.
And listening to you just now reminded me not just the formal learning process that you all go through, but also that it's okay not to know the answers. It's okay to make a mistake as long as you learn from it. It is that also that kind of learning environment,
100%.
Not just the formal learning, but the informal learning and the kind of the requirement or the expectation to be open to failing and to ask questions and all of those things is also. So when I think about your culture, those are the things that I think about.
I'm flattered. Sometimes I get, we're inside the culture, and so we don't even see all the goodness, because we're always thinking about what else can we do. But that is true. And so that whole knower learner construct, am I the smartest guy in the room? Do I have to have the answer if I'm running it? Boy, that was hard for me to get over. And I think I've been over it for a good many years now, but I'm happy to tell my folks that I don't know. I'm happy when they see my mistakes. I'm happy to communicate them. Transparency is another hallmark of our culture, and we hear that over and over. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. What I think I do well is pull the right folks together, and they work the magic. I'm just so humbled by the fact that I've been able to attract folks like, I have into this organization. I don't even want to name them because there's so many recruiters out there calling them. Which, by the way, I will also say, so, and I sit on some peer forums, and everybody's having problems with turnover right now. Knock on wood, since the beginning of the year, we've got 66 folks. We have had not one person leave. And I really do think that is a testament to the culture that we built we talk about, how do you tend to your culture post-COVID? How do you get through all this right now? I think the work that many of us have done for years and years leading up to this has really sustained us through this.
Right. So this is where we conclude the first half of the conversation with Mike. We'll be picking up the next episode as he goes into the 7 elements of culture that he writes about in his book, The Voice of the Underdog. He's also written a blog post on the elements and how to think of them as economies rebound and people start working back in the office again. As always, you can find links to Mike, his new book, articles, and more in the episode notes. Stay tuned for the second half of our conversation. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Rise Leaders Radio on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings, reviews, and shares are also really appreciated. You can also visit rise-leaders.com for all the resources we talked about today and to work with me if you're committed to making your unique and positive impact. Thank you for listening, and remember, elevate your part of the world.